Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche organization with your daily update for October 8th, 2021. I'm going to be discussing what we're facing at this moment in terms of the economy, which is nothing less than a systemic breakdown. And the policies that are being pushed by those in charge from the central banks, the financial institutions, and others are a form of Shaktian fascist policy. That is to defend the corporate cartels, especially in banking and finance, and to impose drastic austerity on the rest of the economy. Now, you're hearing a lot these days about inflation, about supply chains, material and goods shortages, debt, and so on. And all these problems are real. But if we're going to change things, we have to get to the underlying dynamic which is causing these problems. And that is the systemic breakdown, which is exactly what Lyndon LaRouche outlined in 1994 when he produced what he called his triple curve function, which describes the relationship between accelerating rates of growth of financial and monetary aggregates, that is money and notational value, versus the collapse of production, which is caused by the shift of credit into financial and monetary aggregates at the expense of investment in real physical economy. Now, here's how we describe this process in our daily briefing this morning. The chain reactions of breakdown underway today are now dramatic, given the combined effects of decades-long destructuring of production, with whole sections of manufacturing and agriculture relocated to cheap labor sites and concentrated in dangerous ways. Plus, there is decrepit transportation from years of lack of infrastructure building in the transatlantic. Add to this the sweeping deregulation, spot markets, and speculation. You get shortages and spikes in prices in electricity, fuels, and other necessities. No one can pay. No household, business, government function, etc. In terms of food prices, the world food prices are up by almost 33% in September, year on year. That is compared to a year ago in September. Farm prices, just as an example of the inflation, are rising more than 10% year on year. Fertilizer prices are up. You know what you're paying for gas now. And what's happening here is that the overall breakdown is well underway, which is directly related to the Green New Deal, and that's being used to push through the Great Reset. Now, this is something that did not escape the observation of Vladimir Putin, who had an energy conference the other day, and in his transcript he pointed out what he described as the stupidities of spot markets, deregulation, speculation, and the green transition to unreliable wind and solar. And one of the speakers at this conference who's involved in electricity production made the following comments. In Germany, government agencies produce video clips telling people how to spend winter without lighting or heating, how to put candles into flower pots to warm up a room, how to make windows draft-proof with duct tape and film. Just a few years ago now, this would have been impossible to imagine, as if the Stone Age was back. That's from an ally of Vladimir Putin at a Russian energy conference. Now, if we don't defeat the Green New Deal and the Great Reset, then we will be back in the Stone Age. As I've been reporting, as we've been reporting on our website, we can defeat these policies. In fact, there's no slam dunk that this is going to occur. There's opposition everywhere, including coming up at the COP26 conference for the extension of the Paris Climate Accords. So work with us, join the Schiller Institute, contribute to our movement, download our pamphlets and circulate them so we can win this fight. It's the only way to do it, to take on the underlying dynamic as opposed to swinging away at this problem or that problem. Now, I'm just going to take one question today because it's a fairly large question, and I think it's important in the context of what we've just been discussing. Basically, someone wrote to ask, what do you make of the Facebook whistleblower Frances Haugen, who testified, who's on, I think, 60 Minutes and then is going to be testifying before the Congress. She said that Facebook knew of the toxic impact of many of the products it introduced. For example, Instagram, that it affects teens' emotional and physical health. And that Facebook algorithms, she charged, are used to promote extremism and polarization. And she went on to say that Facebook prioritizes profits over public good. Well, of course it does. But I got news for you. It's not alone. What about hedge funds? What about the investment funds that many of you are putting your money into? What about big pharma? What about the military-industrial complex? What about the whole neoliberal doctrine, which essentially advocates freedom for greed, that is, for whatever maximizes short-term profit, over the general welfare, and in fact includes the polemic that if you're committed to the general welfare, you must be a communist or a socialist. So this is a disease of our society, which places personal freedom, personal desires, which are highly manipulated. That's part of the function of social media, to attract you to various forms of entertainment, which are not necessarily healthy for you, to bring your children into an addictive relationship with video games and social media. So this is the deeper issue that's raised by this question. How social media is transforming the way people think about themselves and the way they think. According to Edward Snowden, the social media process, the use of the internet, is altering the neural pathways that are involved in how we develop hypotheses, how we think. Now, one obvious effect is the addictive effect of seeing children in zombie-like states playing video games, and some of these are supposedly educational. Well, what about reading a book? When you read a book, you're engaging in a dialogue with an author, which excites the imagination, which provides new ideas, vocabulary, transports you not out of reality, but into a different reality of a dialogue with the author. What happens when you're on the internet? You're jumping around, something catches your eye, something pops up. The ability to sustain a real thought, other than I want to keep playing this game, is what Snowden is saying ultimately changes the way we think. And there are a number of studies now coming out confirming this. So what can come from this whistleblower's report? Well, let's take a look at one place where they are addressing this problem, which is China. Now, here's where you get into the argument. People say, well, China's authoritarian, China is spying on everyone. I've got news for you. People like Bill Binney and Edward Snowden, who know something about cybersecurity and the use of cyber weaponry to transform a population and to control a population, they say there's nothing China's doing that's not being done in the United Kingdom and the United States, including the so-called social credit policy. So before you jump on China with what I'm about to say, think about it for a minute. The Chinese government just passed a law which says that children must not engage in activities on computers, social media, and internet more than 3 hours per week. Authoritarian, they're telling you what you can do. Well, what they're saying is they want their children to concentrate on science, technology, engineering, the kinds of STEM programs that actually guarantee that there'll be children capable of, as adults, building a future. Unless your future is in making more interactive video games, which are more addictive, then under the current social media and internet programming, you have no future. So the Chinese made this decision. Now, is that really a limitation on freedom? Well, what is freedom? Is freedom the desire to do whatever you want, even if it's destructive to yourself and to others. The extreme neoliberals argue, yes, that's the most important thing about our Constitution. No, what our Constitution defines is responsibilities. One of those responsibilities is the promotion of the general welfare. Another is the common defense. If you destroy a population's ability to think, to engage in cognitive activity, you're weakening the nation's defense and undermining the general welfare. So there's a difference between freedom and license. And really, real Christians know that. So the idea that you have to defend the children's access to the internet as a defense of freedom shows that you've been seduced by this concept of freedom, which is really license. Do your own thing. This is the product of the 1960s. The internet came out of the rock, sex, drug counterculture in the San Francisco Bay Area, including Stanford, including Berkeley. The DARPA research, it's also military-industrial complex, defense applied research production, DARPA. Many of the people who were involved in designing the internet were heavily involved in drugs and took as their model Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. So we have to think these things through. We need a real discussion in this country that will address the first topic I brought up, what is a real economy? But then secondly, what is the real nature of man? Are we creative beings in the image and likeness of God who can solve problems by making new discoveries? Or are we put on earth just to satisfy our immediate impulses, our sense certainty, our momentary pleasures? Well, that's a very important philosophical question. And I'd urge people to take that up, to think about it, and to go to the LaRouchePub.com, the Executive Intelligence Review, where we have an extraordinary archive of material on all of these issues, including the triple curve function of Lyndon LaRouche. So thanks for joining me, and I'll be back next week.